Hey, in today's lesson, we're going to learn about somebody whose name starts with N. Now, can you think of any names that start with N? How about somebody's name in the Bible that begins with N? Well, if you guessed Noah, you guessed correctly. Today, we're going to look about Noah's Ark, maybe one of the most famous Bible stories. But in this story, there's so many important lessons for us to learn. But we need to set up a scene. Right at the start, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and everything was perfect. He created Adam, the first man, and Eve, the first woman. And they could enjoy everything on earth. There was no bad, there was no sin, until one day, the devil came as a snake and tempted Eve, said, "Why don't you eat one of those fruit?" God told you can eat all of the fruit in the garden except from this tree. But the fruit from this tree is the best. God just doesn't want you to enjoy it. Go on, try. So Adam and Eve ate the fruit, and suddenly they realized they disobeyed God and sin had entered the world. And people began to sin more and more and more. And this sin, these wrong things which people had done, made God really sad. And we read that at the start of this passage, talking about Noah's Ark, that God was sorry that he created man. In a sense, all the bad stuff we'd done had ruined and spoiled God's wonderful creation. But when God looked on earth, he seen Noah. And Noah lived differently to everybody else. He was a good person. He was a righteous person. He loved God and respected God's commands. Now, God also wants us to live differently to the people around us. We can see people in our class at school, our friends in our neighborhood, doing things which aren't good, things which don't please God. We shouldn't copy what our friends are doing when they're doing bad things. Or if people are using bad words in school, we shouldn't use them. We should be different. Noah was different to those around him, and God noticed. Now, maybe your teachers don't notice you being good. Maybe even your parents or those who care for you won't notice you being good. But God notices everything. He notices the bad we do and the good we do. And so Noah lived different, and God honored the way he lived different. And God said to Noah, "Noah, I'm going to send a flood to wipe out the earth, to start over again. But I want you to do something. I want you to build an ark." Now stop here for a second. Now before this moment in history, it had never rained. Can you imagine that? It's almost impossible for us to think of a day where nobody had seen rain. But Noah had never seen rain. Now I know some people in some parts of the world where it's warm have never seen snow, and they can only imagine it. Maybe there's something you've always longed to see, but you've never seen it with your own eyes, but you can try to imagine it. But Noah, he couldn't look it up on the internet, he couldn't look it in the book to see what rain was. It had never rained. Well, Noah obeyed God, and he began to build the ark. And as he built it, finally, following God's instructions, and God gave really detailed instructions, the ark was finished. Now, we need to as well, like Noah, really obey what God tells us to do. Sometimes our parents tell us to do something, or our teacher tells us to do something, and we do half of what they say and we think that's good enough. But can you imagine if Noah only built half a boat? That wouldn't have been much good with it in the actual storm. Eventually, the boat was built, and Noah had his ark ready. Probably didn't look much like this, but there was an ark. And then God said, in a week from now, I'm going to send the rain. And all of a sudden, the animals, they began to arrive, 2 by 2. So you had 2 lions, and 2 monkeys, 2 turtles, 2 elephants, and they all began to make their way into the ark in pairs. And then God, when Noah was inside, the animals were inside, Noah's family was inside, God shut the doors of the ark. And it started to rain, drip, drop, drip, drop. The first time they seen rain, but then it rained more and more and more. Now sadly, Noah had been telling people for the years they took him to build the ark, a flood is coming, but people didn't believe him. In fact, they used to joke probably about him, saying he was a crazy old man. What's he building? And sometimes, when we try to share Jesus with our friends and with even people in our family, they can make jokes at us. Our friends in school may think we are not cool because we go to church on the Sunday or church during the week. People around Noah didn't think he was right. They thought he was crazy. But God always does what he says. And God said the flood would come, it would rain, and one day, many years later, it did. And so everything God says in the Bible is true. We can trust it. He will do what he says. And we should tell people. Just like the ark saved people when the flood came. Jesus came to save us from our sins. And it's important we tell people that, even if they don't believe us. We need to keep telling them, because that's the only way for them to be safe. Now the rain came, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and all of the earth was flooded, and only those in the ark were safe. And eventually, after some time, the rain stopped, and the water started to go down, and Noah sent out some birds, a raven and a dove. And eventually, when the dove came back with a branch, he knew it was almost time for him to come out of the ark. Finally, the ark rested on the mountain, land dried up, and just as God had promised, Noah and his family and his animals were safe. Now they went back out onto the land, and God spoke to Noah in a very special way. And he said, I'm going to make a promise. I'm never going to flood the earth again. And to remind you that I'm a God who always keeps his promises. Now remember, God said there would be a flood, there would be, and there was a flood. God said he would protect Noah and his family in the ark, and he did. Now he said, I want to give you a sign to remember that these new promises, I'm not going to flood the earth again, that everything's going to go forward and multiply. To remind you of these promises, I'm going to put a rainbow in the sky. Have any of you ever seen a rainbow? What colours are in the rainbow? Do you remember? So we have the colours of the rainbow, and we can still do it. When we look at the rainbow in the sky, when we see it, we can think, do you know what that reminds me? God always keeps his promises. Now there's a Bible verse in Numbers 23 verse 19. It says like this: whatever God promises, he does. Can you try to say that with me? Numbers 23:19. Whatever God promises, he does. One more time. Whatever God promises, he does. You know, sometimes we can promise our parents or promise our friends to do something, but if something happens and we can't keep our promise anymore, maybe we get sick, maybe we need to isolate for some time, maybe the weather's too bad. But with God, he has the power to always keep his promises. So Numbers 23:19, whatever God promises, he does. Well, thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson and learned some truths from it.